BioShock Infinite is a first-person shooter video game developed by American video game developer Irrational Games in 2013. Infinite takes place in the airborne city of Colombia at the beginning of the 20th century. What makes the setting of BioShock Infinite different is that despite its fictional events, the narrative is still grounded within our real-life universe. The game is filled with complex themes surrounding racism, white supremacy, American exceptionalism, and a twisted version of the Christian faith. Players take control of protagonist Booker DeWitt, an ex-Pinkerton agent who fought at the Battle of Wounded Knee. One night, he was visited by a mysterious couple and was tasked to find a woman named Elizabeth, who has been imprisoned in Colombia since birth, in order to wipe his debts away. Upon being rocket-launched up to the heaven-like utopian flying city of Colombia, what stands in Booker's way is the imperialist leader of Colombia, Zachary Comstock, self-proclaimed the prophet. Comstock quickly notices Booker's presence in Colombia, denounces him as the false shepherd whose arrival he has foreseen in a vision, and then sends an army of Colombia's soldiers and flying gunships to defeat Booker. Based on a loose and poetic interpretation of quantum physics, the story explores the nature of parallel universes, with Booker and Elizabeth jumping in and out of tears in multiple space-time. Without getting too deep into analyzing the story, in this video I'll try to extract what I think are the most important spiritual lessons from BioShock Infinite. This is Ken here. If you enjoy learning real-life inspirations from video games, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos. Insight number 1. Elevate your perspective and see the reality beneath the surface. The main antagonist, Zachary Comstock, portrayed Colombia as a utopian and pure religious society in his speeches and writings. He proclaimed Colombia as the New Eden, along with countless other biblical and political references, such as a city upon a hill from the Sermon on the Mount. Colombia is elevated even higher, city in the skies. As Booker first arrives at Colombia, the city appears in an exceedingly positive light. Parades and fair taking place when player enters the city as it celebrates the anniversary of its independence from the US. The parades, with the accompanying patriotic music, fireworks, and colorful displays, all combine to showcase the city's wealth, abundance of goods, and technological superiority, mirroring real-life exhibitions like the Colombian Exposition of 1893, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. As the game progresses, it exposes the city's reality of sharp contrast and opposites. While many of its upper-class citizens enjoy a luxurious lifestyle and are content with the city's rulers, beneath the surface and in later levels, players also gain glimpses of the city's underbelly of working and lower-class citizens living in poverty in the city's slums. Comstock's utopian vision of Colombia as a city for people willing to achieve the American dream has instead turned into a dystopian nightmare for the vast majority of those citizens that the city's rulers have cast as ethnic others. The early, outwardly positive presentation of Colombia is also quickly complicated by signs that not everything is so utopian underneath. At the early carnival scene, when the grand prize of the raffle is the opportunity to throw the first baseball at an interracial couple, Colombia's equivalent way of public stoning, the couple is booed and mocked by the audience, and on stage they are framed by a mock wedding ceremony that references established racist stereotypes of African Americans as monkeys. This is clearly a spectacle and a pleasurable show for Colombia's citizens. But even though it still uses the bright colors and the cartoonish graphics of the game's characters, it is an emotionally haunting scene for players. It exposes Colombia as a society that takes pleasure in inflicting violence on an interracial couple. The entire sequence satirizes Colombia's militant white supremacist ideologies that reflect the actual anti-miscegenation laws in the US history. Such explicit scenes on racism are rather rare in BioShock Infinite, since the main story instead focuses on Booker and Elizabeth, but not so much the surrounding Colombian society. However, these racial and class divisions are all the more apparent through the numerous posters and other pieces of propaganda found throughout the city. They all hint at the founders' rule over Colombia being an oppressive regime that stays in power through dirty mass manipulating strategies. Some of these propaganda establish a cult of personality surrounding the self-proclaimed prophet. Many other propaganda posters focus more directly on Colombia's society and promote fear and division. For instance, a poster tells people that it is their holy duty to guard against the foreign hordes. The poster distinctly combines nationalism and religion by depicting George Washington with the Liberty Bell and the Ten Commandments, holding off immigrants of various racial stereotypes. Remarkably, while the poster includes a variety of stereotypes of different ethnic groups, among them Chinese, Arabs, and Native Americans, it depicts all of them closely huddled together, using the same colors for all of their portrayals to overall distinguish them from Washington, who stands above as the white Colombian. The poster ignores migrants' national differences and instead combines them into a foreign mass, clearly establishing an us versus them mentality, which leads citizens to perceive all non-white people as enemies that do not belong in Colombia. BioShock Infinite's setting and society relate to nationalist ideologies, even as the city is clearly fictional and a fantastic deviation from the actual US history. In the real world, with so much chaos happening right now, it would be also wise for us to take a step back, detach, and elevate our perspective in order to see the reality that's beneath the surface of what we are led to believe. People and even nations tend to hide their problems and insecurities to put their best, noblest appearance forward. We only see and hear of their triumphs and success, effective results, and brilliant ideas. Narcissistic leaders making beautiful promises and grandiose plans but never actually do the work. If we move closer and look behind the glamorous front, we'll realize that nothing is ever so perfect as it seems. Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly with an elevated perspective.
You know how I said I had plenty of time to read? Well, I tried to figure it out. I read literature on physics and other such things.
Yeah? And what did that teach you?
That there's a world of difference between what we see and what is.
Insight number 2. You possess the power of infinite choices. Towards the ending of BioShock Infinite, Elizabeth takes Booker to the reality service and lighthouse. They travel out through the building store to a place outside space and time, the Sea of Doors, containing infinite number of lighthouses and alternate versions of them. Elizabeth explains that they are within one of an infinite number of possible realities, both similar and drastically different due to choices that have been made. These possible worlds are accessed through different lighthouses. The lighthouses represent ways in which the universe could be different from the current reality.
What are all these lighthouses? Why are we... Who are...
There are a million worlds. All different and all similar. Constants and variables.
In philosophy, the idea that an individual can exist in more than one world is called trans-world identity. According to Elizabeth, there is always a lighthouse, a man, and a city. This implies BioShock is depicting something that philosophers have been grappling with for thousands of years: the existence of God. Philosophers traditionally conceive of God as a necessary being. Given the idea of infinite possible worlds, this means that God exists in all possible worlds. God is a constant, but He gave us the free will of choice, which creates infinite variables in our universe. This is also what the story of BioShock depicts. Not only does Booker have a counterpart in Comstock, he also has a counterpart in Jack, the protagonist from the first BioShock. The original BioShock indicates that only Andrew Ryan can operate the bathyspheres. Because Jack is connected to Andrew Ryan, he can operate them too. But when Elizabeth takes Booker to Rapture to escape the Songbird, Booker operates the bathysphere just like Jack. Perhaps what is the most exciting about BioShock is that even though an infinite number of possible stories is on the horizon, the series also asks the player to consider what we even mean when talking about what it means to be possible in the first place. I don't even know what I mean anymore. Thanks to Ken Levine for leaving deep philosophical questions for players to piece together themselves. We humans have always tried to understand and live our finite lives in relation to infinite possibilities. What could happen? What if? Perhaps. But this endless contemplation becomes purposeless, and infinite choices becomes a burden, and make us even more anxious if our intention is not connected to our Creator, God's will for our lives. We have to trust that God will guide us when we are prepared to do His will, rather than insisting that our own arrogant way is right. That's why it is important to follow our conscience and always be aware of our choices in every moment. Observe carefully which choices elevate us higher towards our true, loving, and authentic self. Which choices leads us downward into the hell of addiction and selfish behaviors. Many people make their choices based on their pursuit of money, pleasures, power, but still feel soulless and unsatisfied. They've become slaves to our society's definition of success. Take a moment to imagine you are standing in front of the sea of doors, with an infinite set of lighthouses and doors surrounding you. Somewhere, there is an ideal counterpart of your true self existing behind one of those doors outside this time and space. Ask yourself, what would that version of yourself be like exactly? What do you have to sacrifice to become that person? Creating and molding your own fate is one of the most rewarding and meaningful responsibility, whether you choose to do or not to do, to persevere or to give up, to desperately hold on or to decisively let go, to be willing to accept or to escape from responsibility. Your every choice and action determines your future's direction. So don't be afraid to decide who you are. Make the right choice in this moment and manifest your destiny. Joseph Campbell wrote, "Follow your bliss. If you follow your bliss, you put yourself on the kind of track that has been there all the while waiting for you. And the life you ought to be living is the one you are living. Follow your bliss and don't be afraid. And doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be. Doors will open for you that wouldn't have opened for anyone else."
All these infinite universes. And yet we end up just going down the same paths.
Insight number 3. Resist mass mentality by retaining your individuality. Zachary Hale Comstock is the leader of the political party called the Founders, who govern the state of Colombia, and its ideals mirror those of the US founding fathers. The Founders promote religious zealotry, ultra-nationalism, militarism, and white supremacy, with Comstock as their defined leader. Their goal is to one day wage war on the United States or the Sodom below. Comstock rules over a warped version of Christianity centered around himself. He adapts the personas of Jesus and Moses from the Bible and adds their likeness to himself. He is the prophet, the Messiah, and the one that will guide the devout to a new Eden, Colombia. Within the game, Comstock's ideologies place him within the realms of fascism. He is the defined religious leader of a single-party state where democracy is seen as evil. Comstock's ideology can further be explained by Carl Schmitt, a political theorist and member of the Nazi Party. Schmitt states, "The best way to maintain a homogeneous, undemocratic society is with the antithesis between friend and enemy." He argues that constitutional arrangements do not ground political communities, but divisions between antagonist groups do. Comstock positions Colombians against a multitude of enemies to unite white Colombians through the use of class division and racial segregation. Enemies of the Colombian state are different factions of non-white, secular, generally lower class, and people with different political ideologies, such as Colombia's #1 public enemy, Daisy Fitzroy, the African-American female leader of the Fox, who initiates a social revolution attempting to overthrow Comstock's rule. According to the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, for those of us who wish to help return sanity to an insane world, the first step is to bring order to our own minds and to live in a way that provides inspiration for others to follow. Jung wrote, "Resistance to the organized mass can be effected only by the man who is as well organized in his individuality as the mass itself." For Jung, religion at its best represents a way for people to develop inner lives and self-knowledge. They gain this through the kind of contact with the unconscious mind, which people call spiritual experiences. Those who have experienced and understood these highly individual experiences are exactly the kinds of people who are harder to manipulate and control. In BioShock Infinite, Booker found religion upon accepting his baptism before turning into Comstock. But he never truly faced and repented from his past atrocities and war crimes he committed against the Native Americans at Wounded Knee. He merely used religion to gain political power and control over the Colombian masses, but never stopped using extreme violence on his enemies. To Jung, psychology if practiced correctly, should do what Christianity does at its best: give self-knowledge to humans, which can empower them to individuate, to help people take responsibility for the darker side of personalities and become full human beings with full integration of conscious and unconscious minds, light and shadow selves. Those are the individuals who are now able to withdraw the psychological projection of their own darkness onto their enemies and able to make peace.
I'm not even here. I'm a projection of your own.
These are the individuals who now able to develop themselves as complete individuals and resist the mass-mindedness of the world around them. Nietzsche wrote, "In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." One last personal advice: never forget who you truly are. Never compromise to please others. Know yourself and have faith in what you believe. Raise your value and shoot for the sky. The more unique and authentic your individuality becomes, the less likely you'll be taken advantage of by so-called leaders whose main interest is to benefit their own agendas. Insight number 4. You are your own worst enemy. Let the old self die and be reborn. Booker DeWitt is a man of partial Native American descent who was born in 1874. At the age of 16, he was a member of the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the United States Army and took part in the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. At Wounded Knee, a sergeant had accused him of having Native American lineage in front of the men in his unit. To avoid being stigmatized by his comrades, he scalped Native American victims and burned teepees with men, women, and children still inside. Due to these gruesome actions, other members of his regiment, including Cornelius Slade, gave him the nickname the White Injun because of his taking trophies from his victims. Booker was ultimately awarded a Medal of Honor and ranked as a staff sergeant in the US Army. Although he was seen as a hero to his fellow soldiers, Booker felt shame and regret for his part in the massacre. After the battle, Booker, consumed with guilt, attended a river baptism performed by Preacher Whiting to be reborn as a new man and be absolved of his past actions. At the last second, Booker rejected his baptism, thinking that his sins could not be washed away by a dunk in the river.
Think a dunk in the river's gonna change the things I've done? Let's get out of here.
This becomes the most important revelation of the game's story. The Booker we have played so far was indeed not baptized. However, the Booker in a parallel universe was baptized, then found new meaning in his life, became deeply religious, and consequently founded Columbia, and then changed his name to Zachary Comstock. The protagonist Booker and the antagonist Comstock are in fact one and the same person, but from different parallel universes. Elizabeth, who was believed to be Comstock's daughter throughout the game, is also revealed as Booker's daughter Anna. Booker and the player learn they have been fighting themselves all along. He in fact is his own worst enemy. The final scenes of the game suggest that in order to correct the course of history to end Comstock's oppressive hegemonic rule over Columbia, Booker or Comstock has to die, so that the splitting of the worlds after his baptism never occurs. Many Elizabeths drown Booker, and all realities in which Comstock exists are erased, preventing Comstock from ever existing. BioShock Infinite has a complicated narrative about multiverse, sin, and redemption. It uses religious concepts from Christian tradition as one of its primary inspirational foundations.
Booker, are you afraid of God?
No. But I'm afraid of you.
There are 4 baptism scenes in the game. The Christian tradition believes that the person who is baptized ritually and sacramentally dies and is raised with and in Jesus Christ, who preceded the faithful in his death and resurrection. The effect of this baptismal rebirth is a cleansing of the heart of all sin onto the baptized. This mark is not visible but spiritual in nature. The baptized person is marked by baptism as belonging to God. He is right that things he had done can't be undone. He brutally killed Native Americans in Wounded Knee, as a result suffered and tormented by his conscience. It takes a genuine heart of repentance to be free of sins and be reborn. To truly repent is to turn away from sins and to turn to God. But after Booker became Comstock, he still held on to his old sinful ways of doing things, using extreme violence, hatred, and division to maintain totalitarian control on Columbia. It is obvious that the things we do wrong have an addictive power. It is not easy to let go of the old sinful way. Jesus said, "Everyone who sins is a slave to sin." It is easier to see this in others' wrongdoing than in ourselves. In our real world so full of evil, we are also our own worst enemy. That evil is also within every one of our heart. Even we know the multiverse theory of infinite is not relevant in our reality. We are inevitably split and divided within our own reality of existence, within our spirits. We experience the opposites of two selves, constantly fighting with one another, between the lower and the higher, fear and faith, selfishness and a desire to give. So, would you kindly choose not to become a slave to sin? Would you kindly make sin and evil the enemy? Choose to hate them bad enough. Would you kindly choose to repent from sin and free yourself from yourself? Would you kindly choose to let your old sinful self die so that you could be reborn as a better man? Thank you for watching. Hope you found some insights in the story of BioShock Infinite and find this video useful to your own personal development. Would you kindly click that like button and subscribe to my channel for more practical video game inspirations for life. See you in the next video.